All right, full screen?
Yes, sir.
Screen. Okay, so I'm a technologist, so I'm not a presentation master. So typically these things are fairly boring, but unless you're one of us, right? So we get it. So fundamentally, what do we do? So what is cybersecurity advisory services? Fairly straightforward, adding a business aspect to traditional cybersecurity professional services. Our goal here is to help our clients improve their security posture through controls assessments, technical analysis of your critical business processes and applications. We help in preparation for audits and certification, help development of process controls, development implementation, and then if you already have an existing environment and you're short on staff, we help you to update, mature, or establish your ISPs, information security plans. We've broken it down to two fundamental brackets of traditional consulting services, which are project-based, fixed price engagements with starts, finishes, and deliverables. And then vCISO services is really retainer-based flexibility for program development, process procedures development. Maybe there's a gap in leadership. We can fill that for a time being. So on the scorecard here, or the business battle card here, is really all of our services in one page. And I wanted to focus on what's highlighted: the cybersecurity maturity assessment and risk assessment, and the focused assessments. And each of these can stand alone. Now, risk analysis I apply to both, because I believe, well, none of it means anything unless I can put a risk wrapper around it, right? What's my risk? What's the likelihood? What's the impact? So we do that to all of our findings, whether it's a standalone network security health check, or a standalone controls assessment, or what I'm going to present today is the comprehensive approach, which is both. Without risk, I really can't sit in front of my leadership and ask for more money unless I put a risk wrapper and a business impact around that. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today. So what is a maturity and risk assessment? So I believe a comprehensive approach, we bring in a technology aspect of a passive analysis engine, right? A technology-based passive analysis engine, basically a sniffer, a probe, right? And we logically place that physically in the network at a logical environment where we get the best. I'm not a network guru, so we get your guys and our guys together and we place it in the right spot. And then combine that with security controls assessment, and then apply risk around the findings, either or in both, right? So both of the techniques, the assessment techniques, and you're all familiar with them, they can stand alone. And unfortunately in our world today, too many, in my opinion, too many organizations are going with pen tests and physical assessments only, and they're leaving out the controls. Or they might go to the other side and they're doing controls assessments to satisfy compliance without doing any real drill down on what's going on in the wire in real time. I personally believe it's the only way I've seen in my experience to get a real-time line of sight. So on a military perspective, you get a mission line of sight. Well, we're not military, but we really still need a mission line of sight from the business process all the way down through to the users consuming the process, building it, using it, making data. Where's the data flow, right? And then really the idea is to bubble up my understanding from the business applications, all the processes and services, the underlying infrastructure, again, all the way down, whether it's shared, cloud, on-prem, whatever it is, through third party. I want to understand that in real time, and as well as policies, process procedures, and organizational readiness. The understanding in turn, all this has to happen under the operational, technical and operational vulnerabilities, threats, risks that exist in your organization. We really need to know what we got before we can build a plan to fix it. So what are my goals in an assessment? The real bottom line here is taking care of the most important risks, right, to the business. We cannot possibly try to satisfy every problem we have. So let's avoid getting, introducing good things to do or things we should do, and focus on what we need to do, what we should do, and what we should do now. So in support of that, we work with leadership in all the lines of business to establish the 3 to 5 to 7 most critical business applications and processes, and the assets associated with them to build that line of sight from application to end user. From there, I want to establish and validate your security controls that are needed to build that strategic roadmap in support of that, right? Based on whatever ails you, right? The best practice, industry best practice, vertical specific compliance requirements, government standards and control frameworks, et cetera. And fundamentally, without a controls framework, we really don't know where we're going. My personal belief. The idea here is to uncover and prioritize, right? Uncover the vulnerabilities, the threats, and the risks, and prioritize based upon the most impact, the potential bad impact to your business, right? The impact potential to business disruption, right? Let's identify, prioritize, lift them up, and identify what has the highest impact, and where are we going to spend that limited bucket of cash to fix over time, right? So then we want to explicitly provide individual recommendations and the safeguards that are specific, measurable, which is very key, and practical to implement. Practicality, implementation practicality is going to be based upon your environment, obviously, your resources available, timelines, et cetera, et cetera. And you guys know this. So break it down to the approach. So we have the technical assessment. So Atlantic, we have multiple partners for this endeavor. We've partnered with Fortinet Technologies as well as some other forensics tools and developed a proprietary passive analysis engine, basically the appliance, which gives us critical insights of what's traversing on the wire in real time. I believe that to be very important. What it helps us do, along with validating existing configuration data, looking at your CMDB output for known hardware and software, endpoints, current status, we also want to plug in and look for real risk in real time against your firewall and IDS, what we're hitting, what we're missing. We want to know what's plugged under the wire that we know about and we don't know about, right? So the discovery and classification of the assets on the wire, very critical. And then the vulnerability scanning, not pen testing, vulnerability scanning of all the hosts and applications tied to those critical assets. Validate your configuration management database, your spreadsheets of what you have, where you have them, where they're at, who has access to them. And then, of course, the analysis and reporting. This is the technical assessment. Again, it's a standalone network health check that I combine with controls. This thing does it, can, will, and stand by itself. The Atlantic consultant reviews and assesses each of the findings, right? Provides the recommendations and remediation strategies, and we'll map them against, again, we believe that to use the frameworks like OWASP, the 10 controls, and MITRE ATT&CK framework, and the techniques and mitigation strategies that they recommend as part of the recommendation strategy for the technical, what we discover. Again, it's important to know that we will wrap a risk wrapper around this as a standalone. I personally believe to map the technical findings and the vulnerabilities and the threats with the controls findings and the vulnerabilities and threats, map those and let those bubble up together for where we're going to spend our bucket of cash again, right? So security controls assessments, again, I truly believe in these. The controls are the safeguards and the countermeasures needed within the organization to protect our CIA, I lost my throat. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the systems, right? Tied to the critical assets, right? From security risk. It's the data, right? It's all about the criticality of the data. How, do we have risk to exposing of the confidentiality, exposure, integrity, or availability of this data? And then the frameworks, they've been around a long time. You guys are familiar with them. NIST, ISO, the Center for Internet Security, HITRUST, PCI, et cetera. So my position and our position is really straightforward. Pick one, right? Pick a control framework and execute against it. To me, we don't know where we're at until we have a map of where we're going, right? So, and know where we're at and coordinates on that. This gives us the coordinates in real time of where we're at in our security journey. So the example I pulled up is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 1.1, the CSF. The CSF is a gold standard. I'm a fan of it, actually. It's really good. There's plenty of mappings to the other controls for CIS, ISO, high-tech, HITRUST. They've mapped back to the CSF. The CSF, again, is backed by the 853 series, again, so we can filter out to the 171, et cetera, et cetera. The bottom line is pick one, right? Establish the common language common language, right? So that everybody's using the same lexicon for when they're talking cybersecurity and enterprise risk. It helps us move what I believe, particularly in CSF, we move from reactive and proactive, to a proactive, or I like preemptive activities. We can preempt. We're really in a good posture. In other words, I could predict and I could put my controls in place because I know I'm an attack vector. I know I'm going to be attacked. I know that ransomware, malware, web application attacks, internal data loss are still the top 4 and 5 attack vectors that we see out there. So let's do something about it, right? So the first thing, what I love about controls is establishing the profile. We have to establish our current state profile, but how do we do that? We have to push out a target state, right? That's the beautiful thing. For something like the CSF, we don't have to recreate the wheel here. We can look at it, we can build our organization into it and build a plan to attain what we need to based on our business model. The beautiful thing that what we do is once we establish target states, we establish the framework who I'm going to use, we understand the controls, where we're at, where we want to go. We could do a crawl, walk, run strategy to get to where we want to, and then understand our current state. I'll use the technical assessment in real time to establish current state, and then a measurement against the controls and the breakdown of those controls, of some controls, to establish our current state. And then for the roadmap, it's really pretty straightforward. Once the target state profile is going to give me the activities, right, that I need to do and execute in order to get there. And my current state, here's where I'm at today over an 18-month period. Let's break it out in 3-month consumable chunks and see what we do every, do a synopsis milestone review every 3 months. All right. So risk. I do not subscribe in an assessment to go down a complete financial risk methodology, right? We see in cybersecurity, I believe we simply do not have the time. What we can do is understand what risk is. And from our perspective, it's a probability of something bad happening sometime in an organization in the future, right? In the simplest form, without getting in a risk dialogue or argument. This is how the focus here is. Is something bad going to happen? Yes. When? I don't know, but we know it's going to happen. So what is my job? I have to identify, quantify, and mitigate the risks. I don't have to really go too far to identify a risk. Just look in the news. A lot of you may have already experienced damaging, attacks. So the risk in real time. What do we do? So we can't fix everything again, like I said, the mantra is let's not try to fix everything because we cannot, right? So we want to identify the highest risk to the business critical applications, the most critical applications and processes and services that you have to watch out for. There's going to be ancillary, I get that, but what are the top 3, 5, 7 business processes? Let's determine that the risks we identify are of the highest priority, right? And then we produce that prioritized list of the risk. In this assessment, I'm not going to provide an exhaustive risk register. We'll feed into your existing risk practices without a problem, but that's not the intent. The intent is to focus telescope into the critical business apps, identify the risk and prioritize that risk. From there, I want to ask some questions, right? And this is what I feed. The responses to these questions actually go to the C-level, right? What are the biggest risks? First of all, we've defined, and you get this from your BCDR, your critical apps. Now, what are my highest risks to these critical apps, right? What are they? What's the likelihood and impact, right, to the business of these risks if they manifest themselves? So one, I can define pretty clearly with working with line of business leaders and yourselves to understand what are the highest risks through this effort. The likelihood and impact, likelihood is going to be somewhat subjective, but impact, you can pretty much get pretty nailed down what the impact will be if this risk manifests itself. But we still need to ask a question and provide a response. Now, what's the cost to do nothing? All right, what if I do nothing to mitigate this risk? Can I accept the risk? What's the risk tolerance within the organization? That, when I pose that question, that leaves the realm of my response. It's above my pay grade. However, it's out there. They need to tell me, and more people in the organization, there's a lot of cost here to do nothing, right? Then what my job is to help understand what is the total cost, the cost and the total cost to remediate these risks. That's the value a cybersecurity professional is going to bring to the table when I'm sitting at the table with the C-level, or I'm providing this data to a CISO to take to the board, the responses to these questions. And not only that, so on the last one, this is really the output of the assessment. What is the total cost to remediate the risk? We've identified the risk through identifying the vulnerabilities and the threats to the line of sight infrastructure and components, all the assets associated with the critical business processes and applications. Now we're going to prioritize activities. We're going to identify remediation strategy, and we're going to wrap it with a high level projection of time, costs, and materials and resources. One of the key things I like to do is in the assessment process, the final analysis, if you will, is a final filtering of our risks through a CIA Triad model. The risk is going to be of one, we're going to hit, it may consume two, the risk we identify might be satisfying, remediation might cover both C and I, right? Confidentiality and integrity, or it might just be something around access, right? Availability and access, denial. So when we filter that, we want to do this to help build the impact to line conversation for the leveling, raising it even another notch of criticality and risk prioritization. When I finally run and this is something we do in collaboration. I can't do this for you. We set up the methodology, but fundamentally we want to finally filter it through the CIA Triad for what's most important to my organization. If you own a if you're the guy that runs water treatment, sewage treatment for your city, town, your system has it's got to be available and it's got to be working. So if maybe availability is the highest, maybe you're a power company, availability is the most important. I get that. But if you're a builder of widgets and you have intellectual property, then really it's unauthorized alteration, right? Integrity and confidentiality. If you're, running, privacy data, then it's all about confidentiality. So you could have, that will, in my experience, will raise the priority of activity. So that's what we want to do with cybersecurity maturity assessments. The summary, we break down the approach to cybersecurity maturity assessments in three aspects. Technical assessment, I truly like them because they work, right? It just simply works. So, I mean, and it's not rocket surgery anymore. We can do them really innocuously with proper planning. And again, because it's a technology, we want to plug it in to get the biggest bang for our buck. And it doesn't have to be exhaustive. It can be representative. So there's a lot of flexibility in where we plug these things in, but the value they bring is immense. It's immense. It opens up the kimono. Now, if you don't want to see the warts, I get it. We don't have to do that, but fundamentally, it's the biggest way for discovery of your assets. We want to discover what's going on. We want to provide different levels of passive vulnerability scanning, no pen testing, but vulnerability scanning, and then the analysis, right, of that. In combination, the technical assessment will consume your review of your infrastructure documentation, data flow diagrams, CMDB output, whatever you can feed that we can validate and verify with real-time scanning. And then also, there's also deeper diving of vulnerabilities on explicit hosts, VMs, et cetera, applications, et cetera, that need to be assessed. That's the technical piece of it. Again, it can stand alone, and a lot of times it does, quite frankly. And it may be a crawl, walk, run where initially you do a technical assessment and you find out where all the warts are, and we begin a strategy to fix that, and later on come in at a more mature level and apply controls assessment or a control strategy. The security controls begins in pick one, right? Start by deciding what control framework to go with. I personally, the NIST, you can't really argue with it, but a lot of people, they're not government, they don't want to chase it down. I'm fine with that. You have the Center for Internet Security, the CIS version 8, which is awesome, right? So those are my two favorite, right? Then we can go, if we have to satisfy PCI, if we have to satisfy healthcare, we can. if we pick CIS or NIST, the CSF as our leader of our top level controls, we can actually accommodate anything else. So that's why I like those two. One is a government or government, state, local, fed, and the other is for none. And they're beautiful frameworks, and there's a lot of work going into them. The bottom line here is using the crawl, walk, run ethos, establish an attainable target state, not pie in the sky stuff. Let's get real about it, right? So then using the various auditing techniques, we personally will use the same techniques to validate artifacts as an auditor would. The reason that's important is to prep your organization. If you need to prep for compliance audit, we can help you get there by basically pre-mimicking an auditor without being an auditor, right? Because what we want to do is we want to help you mitigate as well. So that's the difference what we can do, but we're going to apply the same technique. And then bottom line is establish the current state. Once we know what you've picked, we've done a technical assessment, we see this stuff, right? You've chosen a security controls framework. We've established with you a target state. And then we come down to, okay, here's our current environment. Here's where you're at against your target on a controls framework. Here's where we are from a technical perspective. Let's map those together, roll them up, and build risk around that, right? The final thing is risk. I want to present everything we do with a risk wrapper, right? And that way, it's a lot easier to wrap a fiduciary comment around that, in my opinion, right? I can justify to my senior leadership, the request is spend, right? Once we can tie the risk, the cybersecurity risk specifically to a business critical application or critical business application. And again, it's just really a rehash here. The risk is a probability of something harmful happening sometime in the future. My job as a cybersecurity professional, identify, quantify, and mitigate, period. It doesn't get beyond that, right? So this is I like, now the quantitative analysis is awesome. We don't have the time, and typically we don't have the luxury of time or the resources to drill down in deep quantitative. So we apply qualitative, and we do it multiple times during the year, and we can feed into a larger, like I said, a larger risk program through our efforts. And again, the goals are straightforward, right? I think the goals are pretty straightforward. Identify the highest risks, right? Let's prioritize them based on the business needs. If we do that, we're talking business language to our leadership. We're going to be able to do the right thing when we begin to be seen as an enabler. And again, fundamentally, the questions I want to ask, I want to ask them, and I want to have answers for. What are the highest risks? Are they the highest risks to that, right? What are the risks? What are the highest risks? Are they really the highest risks? So we get that answer. What's the likelihood and impact if these risks manifest themselves? We can get that answer. Cost of doing nothing, again, subjective, potentially, you may know, and then cost to remediate. So that's what we can do to help from a consulting perspective in cybersecurity from our organization, right? So I'm a cyber guy. I'm a cybersecurity guy. I don't know any other way to present this. So I'm hoping that it was received. Most of you guys and gals are security people. You get it. It's not. I don't think it's rocket surgery. I think we just really need to understand your environment, right? Pick a track, a controls track, get after it, right? And let's really dig deep on your critical aspects, the critical applications, the critical lines of business, whatever they are, right? To me, it's not as important if there's 10. We have to prioritize. People tell me all the time, "Oh, I can't prioritize." They're all important, is what I hear. Oh, they're all important. Okay, I understand. If you run a city, everybody's important. I get it. But in reality, within those lines of businesses, organizations, or departments, something is the most critical, right? Let's look after that first and foremost, even if we're doing it across multiple lines of business, right? I think if we break it down to that level, we can articulate the effort, and hopefully, you can get out there and make it happen. So that's my mantra. I'm going to get off my box because I think I'm in between you and some beer. Chuck out.